Sonic citizens, to the second installment of the Noiseblast Hour. This is brought to you by Noise Engineering, and the Noiseblast Hour is a variety series of sporadic release and indeterminate continuance. This is People of Interest, curated by the Noise Engineering team. Today's guests, we have Tom Hall and Ryan J Raffa, not in that order. For future reference, episode 1 is archived, and this episode will be archived as well. They're going to be doing some performances and answering some questions, and hopefully you'll enjoy the performances and get some information out of the interviews, and yeah, enjoy. This is Ryan J Raffa. Will be performing first. Here we go. Without further ado. That was Ryan J Raffa. Thank you. That was very beautiful. Sounded fantastic. Thanks again for that. That was really lovely.
Yeah.
Something that jumped out about that to me is you're working with these electronics and these electronic sounds and not field recordings of any sort. But I had a very, for me, the interpretation, it just felt very natural, like sitting by a river with the sun reflecting off of it and that sort of thing. It's really funny that something electronic can evoke something like that.
Thank you very much. I take that as a high compliment. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It was really nice to hear. Of course, something that came up last time, people were always really interested in what you're using and what equipment you have. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a rig rundown of what your main things are.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. I mean, really, to start any patch or any setup, I really start with memory and start with like a place or a moment, and that really feeds into the choices that I make of the things that go into the case. So for this one, I'm really excited about the morphogene and by Make Noise and the verbose bark filter. Those two were like the first two things that went into the case when I was first putting the things together.
Okay, and you use those to great effect. It's funny that you say place, because that's something that seemed to really kind of jump out at me. I felt like I was somewhere, and that's really cool to me when you feel that from music, where you just feel like you're transported somewhere else than other than where you are. Anything else in the case you wanted to mention offhand, or was that kind of the main players? Or
yeah, no, I think every piece and every choice has an impact on the outcome, and it's important to embrace those. So for this, I knew I was traveling, so I tried to keep things light. So for a sequencer, I'm using an OP1 through a mono Ansible, and I really love that pairing. I think they work well together. Just the little, what you might consider mistakes or anomalies actually can be centerpieces of what it is that you do with your music. I use a bunch of mannequins modules. I really love everything that they do. So not a ton of voices, not a lot of oscillators. I'm just using the mangrove right now. Those are the highlights. It's hard because everybody's doing such great work. I'm excited about it all.
It's hard to choose what goes in the case, in other words. Yeah, that's something else I like to ask people about, because you have such a variety in the modular world of people who maybe build a case and really leave it the same for 3 years, or they change it out every time they use it. It sounds like you're in the latter school where you think about maybe the performance and change it out. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I'm all about iteration. I think that's the key for my process. As in my creative work, I look at everything that I do as just another step and not the final. And nothing is ever done. You're just on kind of a ongoing journey. So the patch is never done. It's this is where I am today, and then tomorrow it'll be something else. So
sure, sounds analogous to the life process of evolving and learning and moving on. Where did you spend your formative years of your youth?
Well, I mean, most of the time I've spent in Brooklyn of my life. I was there for 16 years, and it definitely shaped my creative practice and just the community of people I was fortunate enough to work with for a long time. So I did a lot of music in New York. I'm a drummer, and everybody's looking for a drummer that can show up.
That can show up. That's the key part.
Yeah. So I played in a band for 10 years, and that had a massive influence on, discovery and really just saying, wow, I want to be an artist. I think I'm going to be a musician. That's what I want to do. So New York had a huge impact on that.
Yeah. Something I've asked other guests about, and I wanted to ask you about, is the idea of place and where you grew up and where you're currently staying influencing your work. I mean, of course, culturally it's going to influence, but I feel like geographically and in a sense of what the weather is and things like that, somehow, I don't know, I feel like they really influence what people's style is. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, you should absorb everything that's around you, even even if it's sometimes negative, it's good to, try to understand and come to terms with it. So I just moved to Taipei in Taiwan, and, I'm so grateful for the community there, because that's actually where I discovered Modular, and the folks there have been incredibly supportive in what I'm up to. So that's been great. And it also is that idea of you remove yourself from what you've been in for a long time, and then you see things a little bit differently. So just the way I hear and the way I listen, and I don't speak Chinese. So, I sit in a room, and instead of it being, oh, they shouldn't have said that, it's, this is a beautiful sound that is reverberating in this room. I wish I could reamp in this room.
Sure.
That idea.
Uh-huh. Wow. So you've only been into Modular since your move?
Yeah. It started about a year ago. Yeah.
Wow, that's really impressive. It sounded really fantastic. Enjoyed it.
Well, I've played music my whole life. So I've, like many people, I played piano since I was 4, and I was a classically trained percussionist, and I could have gone that route, but I actually ran for a little while, and I always knew music would be there. So, I ran in college. I didn't even, I almost dropped music completely. And then moving to New York, it was just, I want to be doing this thing. So, yeah.
Sure. What was your first instrument?
Piano. I started on piano, and I think that was like the Suzuki method. I don't know. Everyone probably, right? And
I think Stephen was part and Chris? Wow. All right.
Yeah, and those two, I think Montessori, I was a Montessori school student, and with Suzuki, I think those ideas, you don't realize it until much later, and then you reflect like, wow, those had a tremendous impact on what I do today, what it is that I'm interested in, how I think about things. Yeah.
So your first exposure to synthesis, wasn't in New York, or was that, I mean, you were probably exposed to it, of course. What was your first awareness of synthesis, I guess?
Man, my first awareness of that sound is to be played with was definitely a tape deck. Sure. My parents, I can't remember exactly the make and model, but I just know as a child we were in Pennsylvania, and that was like a central, if I think about Pennsylvania, I think about this tape player. And, I can open it up, I can press on it as it spins, I can record my own sounds, I can splice it up, I can really have fun with it. That's like a firm memory from childhood of me and sound relating to it. I like piano, but my teacher never thought I practiced enough. So, maybe it was just because I wasn't into it, but I was way into that tape player. So,
how old were you when you had the tape player?
Probably 5 or 6. Yeah.
That's so funny you say that. That was my very parallel world. Was my dad brought home a tape player from Kmart with 3 blank tapes, and I think it was the first thing I owned that wasn't a child's toy, so I really revered it as well. But I mean, what it did was just amazing and blew my mind and got me into this whole path as well. That's really funny. So then, what was your first exposure to modular stuff? Was that in New York or after?
My first exposure, I did a lot of installation art work, and I was writing a lot of stuff, rolling my own, and I felt that what I was most focused on at that time was what people would do when they're interacting with it. Let me just see if I can find things that can make sound. So I remember going to Control in Brooklyn. Sure. And just feeling I had learned to code, I had explored many different avenues, and I felt wow, this is pretty amazing stuff. Maybe I'm not sure if I'm ready to do it. So, we could talk all day.
we could talk all day. Let's see here. Well, I guess we're going to move on in a second here. I did want to ask if you ever had a musical epiphany or a big pivot point that kind of changed you in your life, or if it just was all a gradual process.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at it like a process, and sometimes the uncertainty of it all. Mm-hmm. And that for me is definitely when my son showed up. It really helped me zero in and focus on what it is that I want to do in this lifetime. So that's the epiphany moment for sure.
And it's ongoing, it sounds like. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was a really great performance, and it's great to meet you and chat with you.
I did want to say thanks to Noise Engineering and Chris and Steven and the whole crew here for having me out. It's a great time.
Indeed. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ryan J. Raffa. And where can people find you online if they're interested in your work?
Probably Instagram is probably the best spot. I post there regularly. I'm really, honestly, the travel over here, I was jonesing. Like, I was really, there'd be days it's like, I haven't patched in 24 hours. I'm really, this is not good. So.
Right. And you're RJ Raffa, is that right?
RJ Raffa, RJRAFFA.
Fantastic. Okay, so you can find him there on Instagram. And thank you again. Yes, and we'll chat more, I'm sure. And we'll be here for the next few hours chatting. Next up, as the Noiseblast Hour moves forward, we're going to hopefully add variety to the variety show, and it's not just going to be all Eurocentric. And bringing some variety today is going to be Tom Hall, who is here with his 5U setup and has some other interesting stuff going on, it looks like, over here that you will soon see. And he is about to do his performance. So without further ado, Tom Hall, take it away. That was lovely and wonderful.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Noise Engineering, for having me.
It was awesome. I love I feel like a lot of it was kind of riding on the edge of like familiarity and then luring you into these unexpected zones, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I'm playing a lot with chaos theory and also Pascal and Fibonacci numbers. So, there's certainly this familiarity to the sound, but at the same time, when they're offset, it can feel like discontinuity as well. Like, yeah.
Interesting. So that some of that math could be inherently recognizable, but we're hearing it in a new way presented through sound and that sort of thing, which is really cool.
Definitely. I mean, the power of phi being that, it's in a lot of nature, a lot of society, a lot of engineering, a lot of, architecture. So the number sequences are quite familiar to us, but it's something that I have become very interested in the last several years.
That's awesome. Also, I was noticing, I was just having a discussion with a fellow sound designer about our love of the use of very high frequencies and very low frequencies at the same time, and how I think a lot of technology has enabled that in these years, where in the past you couldn't really reproduce things that high with the op amps that were available, or reproduce the lows with the speaker systems, and it's really cool to hear that sort of technology kind of spreading into those zones a little bit, and I think music moving into that as well, especially what you were just doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of something like back in the cassette days, where basically everything had a high-pass filter on it, going down to like 12K, and now with CDs and digital, we can go right up to beyond people's hearing capacity, in fact. But yeah, I mean, nothing says space like, firing off a super low bass sound and a high-end sound at the same time. But that's I think of it more in terms of a palette than in frequencies. So, I mean, like a lot of sound designers think this way, and then giving everything its space to breathe, rather than making just a wall of sound or a wall of noise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it almost like those Moreau paintings, like when you use a really wet sound with a really dry sound, the way he would use a almost blurry background of color with this really bold black front. I think of that as kind of the dry sound in front of the really blurry, sort of echoey, reverb, smeared out sound. I think of it kind of visually. I'm sure other people have different things. Analogies they use, like Walter Murch's idea of, you have language sounds versus musical sounds across the spectrum and that sort of thing. I wanted to, of course, hit upon something I'm sure you're a great person to talk to about, is process. And I kind of want to get into your head a bit about, like, when you head into the studio, like, what's going on? What do you come in there with a clear head, or you come in there with a clear direction, or is it just always mixed up, or does it depend on what you're working on?
It sometimes depends. I do sound design for Turia and a few other companies, and also, work at Cycling 74, Max MSP as a content developer. So sometimes it can be very like, I need to get this done, so there's a real intent. And other days I most certainly like, and as many people will have seen on my Instagram, like to have my experimental days where I'm finding out the capabilities of both the machinery, but also like trying to push my own skill base further. I really think some parts of the music realm and also in sound design have become comfortable with a certain vocabulary of sounds, and I think we still have an infinite amount of possible areas to explore, and something that I'm consciously trying to do in my own work is to kind of push the envelope at what it means to push sounds together. I mean, it's great that we're still using FM synthesis, but John Chowning whipped that up about 30-something years ago. I mean, yeah, so coming up to 40 years. And, there's still a lot of possibilities there, but we have a lot of processing power now. We have a lot of possibilities. And that's something that keeps me motivated and excited, is to just keep exploring. So, yeah, it's going into the studio, it depends on, is there some deadlines? Do I need to get something done by a certain time, or can I got time to mess around right now and explore? And I like to try and keep that keep that there for my own creativity and practice. Yeah.
Definitely. I relate to the deadline. Sometimes it has to be done and by X amount of time, or you have time for the exploration. It's funny you saying pushing the boundaries. I was kind of feeling that with what your performance today, where it was like edging out of familiarity. And I think it's kind of funny too, that's almost analogous to how society works, where if somebody comes along with an idea that's just way too futuristic, people can't really grok it or attach to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's pushing things just enough out of their comfort zone, it's fascinating, but somehow retains some familiarity to it.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that aspect of both giving the viewer, somewhere to gravitate or hold on to, but also not making it super easy for them. I mean, I come from creative visual arts, conceptual arts background. I don't have a music background, and a lot of the work I explored before I found sound was provocative, and I want people to think. I want people to get outside of their comfort zone a little bit, because, I mean, more than ever now, we're pretty comfortable, and yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm edging you out of here. We might want to move in a little bit here. I'm going to shove the... You're very tall, intimidating. What was your first exposure to synthesis? You grew up in Australia, yes?
That's correct. Yeah, sound actually, in some ways, it found me. I had an interest in kind of like linear mediums, I guess you would say, like film and video and sound. But my university major was photography, and I went to Japan to study. And this is before the internet was really working, efficiently. And my sensei told me on the first day, we don't have a photography department. So I'm like, what? I left the first time leaving Australia. I've signed on to study in Japan for a year, and there's no photography department. But I was open to it, and I mean, I feel like that openness, just as a person, has helped me get a long way in life. But I embraced it, and they put me straight into, literally in the first week, we were in a J-pop recording session using Pro Tools, and I'm like, sampling rates? What does this even mean? Like, and I persevered with it, but it wasn't speaking to me because, like I said, I came from a pretty visual and conceptual arts background, and this was very, rudimentary, like learning kind of about sound. And fortunately, my sensei was very observant and took me aside and asked me to go to his office. And I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble. And showed me Max MSP. And I said, well, you mean to say I can build my own ways that I process sound and develop sound? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, and so it just spiraled from there. I basically started making little patches and manipulating sound in weird ways, and yeah.
Wow, that's fortuitous in a way that you couldn't have predicted at the time, as a lot of things go in life, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, and from there I got into found sound and then manipulating field recordings, and it kind of just continued in that way. But I would say that I've always been interested in whether it's synthesized or found sound, in linking my work back to the environment. So here I was using a lot of Fibonacci numbers, Euclidean numbers, and I like this aspect of referencing environments, whether it be directly or indirectly. I feel like there's something about that way of working with sound that kind of, approaches or gives the listener something to engage with that's not necessarily like a 4 on the floor beat or something. And yeah, part of this is personal. I love techno, I love break beats, but it's you can only, the probability of you making the pattern that someone else has already made in a 1-bar loop, pretty high probability. It's just not enough there for me. It doesn't keep me interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's like the Captain Beefheart says, it's the bomb, 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 mama heartbeat that he's trying to break away from, It's funny, we had 2 very different sets today, but both of you were interested in space and environment and place and nature as an influence on what you're doing. It's really cool to hear. I wanted to ask you also, it comes up a lot when people watch these, they want to hear about what you're using. Could you maybe give us a little bit about your rig and a rundown of what you're mainly leaning on here?
So majority of the sound is coming from the 5U modular, but it's all being sequenced from Max MSP. So Max is taking care of a lot of the heavy math and sequencing, and then getting these lush palettes of sound. I have all of the noise engineering 5U modules, which I absolutely love. They didn't pay me to say that, but I would say I spent a lot of time with the vanilla 5U modules, the usual things you're familiar with, classic oscillators and that, but to have the noise engineering modules in that larger format and just be able to have a big old wang on the knob is it's something. It's easy to find in a live set. If the 5U didn't weigh so much, I'd consider taking it live more. But yeah, so a lot of the sounds are coming out of there, and then they're going into Max, and some of them are staying basically untouched. Some of the more rhythmic stuff, and then other parts I was then using a few granular synthesis based engines to then kind of just mold and push and manipulate them a little further. But yeah, there's something in this setup is very playable. It can sometimes combining Max and a Eurax system can be a little complex because you're looking at relatively small things on the screen with Max, and then you look at this, you turn over and you've got a massive bird's nest of a patch, and you're trying to find this one knob you want to turn, but you can't find it. I mean, it's just small thing after small thing, but this setup is super fun because I was able to just glance up quickly, knew exactly where and find it very easily. Yeah, this is totally all just came to me today while I was thinking of like playing just now. I'm like, yeah, this feels very fluid. So
That's cool. You're blending a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of people get into the analog versus digital, and for me, the war is over. It's like, hey, whatever works that day, or blending them, they work together great. Tape's fun, and digital's great.
It's that's a totally flawed argument. The doorless one completely cracks me up. It's like, do you know how many computers were involved in the making of your module? I mean, I had a classic once. I shouldn't even say this on camera, but a guy had a big mutable instrument system and was raving about his analog sound. And I broke his heart when I told him that he had more CPUs in his Eurax system than my MacBook Pro.
Or what landed on the moon, for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally... I feel like as if you're a true creative and musician and you're getting caught up on those very minute aspects, you're the only person... You're not winning any arguments. You're just hurting your own creativity, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of it as like Thai food versus Mexican food. It's like, well, I mean, I want them both, you know? It depends on what day it is. And one's, why do I have to choose one? I mean, I can use either of these.
Oh, yeah, it's like pick a side, but it's your loss ultimately if you stay on either of those sides. Yeah.
What would be your desert island instrument?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Well, the 5U's out. It's just way too heavy. And it doesn't float. It's definitely not going to float. Make a great boat anchor. The laptop is still probably one of the most powerful electronic music making tools out there. I mean, you can't really deny that. But, that I love the Nord Modular G2. Not going to be that good on a desert island, but I can probably solid power the laptop, but not the G2. But complex choice. I'm fortunate to sit on both sides of eating Mexican and enjoying Thai food. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I don't ever have to go to a desert island.
Well, how about favorite travel instrument? Do you have something you like to take in the plane or the?
I've tried it. I've tried the OP1 thing on the plane, and I don't like planes a whole lot anyway. I find it's actually, as I've gotten older, that it benefits me to just try and get as much sleep as possible. And the music I make ends up sounding like shit because my ears are like half blocked. So I did cram some stuff in on the way to Australia where I was still finishing up what I was going to play like literally the day that I landed. But yeah, I mean, traveling with it gets more complex. TSA, all of that stuff. I found, in fact, my life and my sanity is just better if I kick back, have a beer, and watch a movie.
Sounds about right. I can relate to that. You have any hobbies outside of synthesis that you wanted to mention that may or may not influence that sort of thing?
I really enjoy motor racing. I have a motorcycle which I enjoy riding. A large hobby of mine is music. So I mean, I'm in Los Angeles. It's got no shortage of great experimental shit. In fact, it's hard to decide to stay in and work on your own stuff sometimes because there just is so much happening. So yeah, a big part of my life is just the arts in general. Sure. And yeah, there's not much else.
Final real tough question. Creamy or crunchy peanut butter?
Crunchy.
Really? All right. Well, that may tell you a lot or may not. All right, Tom. Thank you so much. It's great to always hang out and see you, and awesome performance. And
thanks, Shawn, and big thanks to Ryan for playing today. It was great to join him on the bill, and also big love to Noise Engineering.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, and great to have you. And I guess we'll wrap up here. He could have done the elevator. This wraps up the second installation of the Noiseblast Hour, brought to you by Noise Engineering. Today's performers were Ryan J Raffa and Tom Hall. Thank you so much for tuning in. These are archived on YouTube, as those of you watching YouTube know, so that's redundant. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Noise Engineering out.